Welcome to Being a Successful Leader with Carl Welty. Carl is a leadership pioneer with years of challenging leadership and consulting experience. Here's Carl with some valuable insights, practical and proven methods for being a successful leader.
Welcome, Carl Welty here, your host for the podcast series, Being a Successful Leader. The intent of this series is to provide you with valuable insights and practical and proven know-how on how to be a successful leader. And above all that, to enable you to gain greater clarity, competence to move things in a good direction for you and be proud of that. 3 imperatives, I believe, for successful leadership. The first is being a self-aware and skillful leader. The second of the 3 is formulating, executing a sound strategy. And the third is building a culture of commitment. Self-aware and skillful leader, sound strategy, and culture of commitment. 26 weekly episodes, each ranging from 15 minutes to half hour. And the episodes revolve around the 3 imperatives I just mentioned. We're actually in the 3rd imperative now, the one of building a culture of commitment. And the topic today is performance coaching. There are 4 building blocks I have in my building commitment book. The first is selection, and 2 episodes ago we reviewed that and really honed in on providing you with a comprehensive process to prepare for and to conduct an effective selection interview. Very, very important management activity regarding very, very important management activity of selecting the right people, getting a good fit with the position and the culture. And then last time we visited the second of my 4 building blocks, and that's the one in clarity. And we spent some time in going through something, a unique and powerful process I have, a structure, if you will, called a precision plan, and help you to clarify with your associate the role and set of results that that person and people reporting them, if any, are organized to achieve. Really good stuff. And today we talk about performance coaching. So you selected the person, either hired from the outside or an internal selection. You had great discussions on ongoing expectations, and also, as we covered also last week, time-limited expectation, goal setting, and action plans. And now you need ongoing conversations. You just don't abandon them. You need to really pace with them. And I call that performance coaching. So let's first start off with coaching. What is coaching? Very simply put, I think of coaching as the having people, helping people do what they need or want to do, to help them gain the necessary clarity, confidence, and competence to perform as desired. Let's go a little bit deeper. I have something called a coaching spectrum, and if you will, by the way, you can check all this out by getting my book, Building Commitment. And I should mention that all the past episodes in this podcast are also on my website, welty.com. Go to welty.com, go over to Leadership Resources, scroll down to the website, click on there, and you can pick up any past episode. Also, you see my books, and the book we're talking about now, that parallels what we're talking about now, is the Building Commitment. And all the stuff we'll be talking about is in there, including what we're talking about now, the coaching spectrum. So I'm going to give you a nice little model here. And if you don't have the book now, just take a piece of paper, if you'll, draw a line across it. And on the left-hand side, put inquiry. And the right-hand side, put advocacy. This is a spectrum of coaching. There's not just coaching is coaching. There's different dimensions or variations, if you will. So on the left-hand side, inquiry, that's where you're asking questions, gathering information, making some suggestions, and so forth. And as you move from left to right, you take on a stronger role in your coaching. As you go over advocacy, you're actually having some of your opinions and so forth fostered. So advocacy would be like advising and telling. So as we put it all together, going from left to right, under inquiry, you have asking and suggesting. And then as you move over advocacy, you have advising and telling. So you can see the different gradations there. There's no rightness or wrong with any of these. You got to pace with the situation and figure out what is best. Now, my coaching purist friends would say that telling doesn't belong. That's not coaching, they tell me. Well, I disagree. Just think about when you were learning something, you didn't know how to do it. Teaching is part of coaching, okay? And you as a leader manager do a lot of teaching, as you should. And also telling once in a while, because involving safety, you don't advise, and that's what you tell. That's not acceptable. So it does have a place. And again, you need to gauge what your involvement should be here. Now, let's take the case of a golfing coach. You haven't, let's say that you're starting golf. You don't know much about it. So a coach would start off by telling you about the grip and the stance and that sort of thing, and kind of the basic nature of the swing. And then as you take some practice hits and so forth and so on, they'll then adjust you by advising, do this and do that and so forth and so on. So that's just good coaching. And on the other hand, let's say that you're a fairly experienced golfer, and the coach that you're working with now, rather than telling you a bunch of things and advising and that sort of thing, wants to see you swing. So you swing a few times, hit some balls and so forth, and then they pace with that and maybe make some suggestions and maybe ask you about how this feels or that feels and what the results seem to be to you. Now, that's just good coaching to review fundamentals for a beginner, then observe, then use the spectrum. And with somebody who has played before, observe, focus on areas needing work, and then use the spectrum. All right. Hoping that's very valuable to you. So let's move from coaching in general to what I call performance coaching. What I mean there is performance coaching is ongoing work-centered quality conversations between you and your associate, where you're providing direction, guidance, and support to allow that associate to be successful, and to use the coaching spectrum in doing so. So it involves frequent conversations where you're reinforcing expectations, achieving expectations, specific work you'll be talking about, helping, encouraging, nurturing. What it is not is idle chatter, just schmoozing. That's fine, but that's not what we're talking about here. It needs to be genuine, and you're not micromanaging here. You're performance coaching. It's a management best practice. It allows you to reinforce training that the person has had. So many times people go off to training efforts and they come back and nothing's changed because the environment is not conducive to them to implement things. So it's a great reinforcer of training. And also, research tells us that the associates who have a good leader manager, hopefully like you, that provides performance coaching, they outperform those who aren't as fortunate. So good practices there. Well, if such a good deal, performance coaching, why isn't practice more? And it's not, certainly in my observation and my work and so forth, and perhaps in yours too, as you observe. A guy named Bruce Tulgan, Tulgan, in his book, It's Okay to Be the Boss, I think a really good book, highlights, 7, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different, reasons, or myths for this, what he calls epidemic about underperformance coaching. One is the myth of empowerment. So the leader manager thinks, well, the way you empower people is to leave them alone and let them do their thing. But the truth is that people perform better when they're given the proper direction, guidance, and support. To do otherwise is false empowerment. The second of the myths is a myth of fairness. The way to be fair is to treat everyone the same. Well, that doesn't hold any water either, because you're going to treat people based upon their needs, and you do more or less based upon their performance. The third of the myths is the myth of the nice guy. The only way to be strong is to act like a jerk, but I want to be a nice guy. But nice guy managers do what it takes to help associates. That's the nice guy. The next one is the myth of difficult conversations. The leader manager thinks being hands-off is the way to avoid difficult conversations. Well, being a weak manager makes for more mess, more inevitable conversations about problems. So you want to do some good performance coaching and counseling and avoid those difficult conversations. The myth of the red tape. Managers are prevented from being strong because there are so many factors beyond their control. The red tape, the corporate culture, senior management, limited resources. But focusing on the many factors that you can control is the way to be a stronger manager. The myth of the natural leader. I am not good at managing. The best managers are people, natural or not, who have a genuine desire to manage and engage, as what we talked about throughout this series, in deliberate practice to apply practical improvement methods and know-how to be a good manager and performance coach. The myth of time. There's not enough time to manage people. Quality performance manager reduces the things that can go wrong and is a good time management technique. Okay, all the reasons that managers don't do as much performance coaching as they should, and we can debunk every one of them. Okay, key concept here. Key concept, make note of this. And I call this pacing with your associate. Like the golf metaphor we used here, where the good coach who's working with a fairly experienced golf student paces with them, looks at their swings, doesn't start all over and doesn't start going down the spectrum from telling and advising and so forth, but meets the client, the coaching pupil, where they're at. And that's what we want to do in your role as a leader manager. So there's two things we need to talk about here. One is my little model of approaches to managing, and then the other is the maturity level of your follower. And what we're doing here is matching up your different approaches to the maturity of your follower. So bear with me here. Let's talk about the approaches to managing first, a continuum again. On the left-hand side, you have directive, and in the middle, collaborative, and then on the right-hand side, delegative. Directive, collaborative, delegative. Fairly self-explanatory terms. We could actually go farther and say free reign, but that's not a part of your opportunity. You don't want that to do your thing. You need to be there as a leader manager. But it would be another option. You're not going to get very good results, but we'll stick with the directive, collaborative, and delegative. So as you move from left to right, you're affording more discretion. You're allowing your associate to plan, do, and control more of the work. Okay. So directive, again, to define each of these before we move on to the maturity level. Directive is a telling, a high degree of teaching. The collaborative is discussion and consultation, both about the what's, the desired results, and the how's, how to go about it. And the delegative is allowing ample associate discretion regarding the how's and perhaps the what's. Okay. Now let's move from the management approaches, the three I gave you, to the level of competence and motivation. That's the maturity level, as I call it, the level of competence and motivation of your associate. It's a rough gauge, but it's an important one, very, very useful. So what you want to do then is you match your approaches to managing directive, collaborative, delegative to the maturity level of your associate. Now, I just use like M1 to M4 you could, for maturity, or if you prefer development, you go D1, D2, D3, D4. So on the left-hand side, you have low maturity, and the right-hand side, high maturity. So as a person gains level, increases their competence and motivation in terms of a particular task, a particular assignment, or the position as a whole, or a particular key result area, you provide them more discretion. And it makes sense if you have a new person, even though they have a lot of relevant experience, you're going to stick pretty close. And you're going to, until they get the lay of the land and so forth, you're going to provide a directive. And maybe as they gain maturity, you're going to move to more collaborative, and then eventually delegate it. Okay, hopefully that makes sense to you. It's simple, but it's so profound. And a lot of leader managers, they just kind of do the same thing all the time, and they don't, as I say, pace with their associates. Very, very important concept here. Some important points about this pacing. You want to work through slowly. People will advance through their maturity levels at obviously different paces, but you want to work slowly, take them through the different stages. You don't want to neglect your high performers. Don't take them for granted. So even though you may be more of in a delegative mode with them, you don't want to ignore them. You appreciate them. You got to let them know that. Another important point about using the pacing concept, people will develop at different rates. Another one is not all will reach full maturity, and that's okay. In other words, they're not all going to go up in our example here to a level M4, or maturity 4, or development 4 stage. But if they're doing a good job and so forth, and just don't have the ability to go beyond that, feel fortunate. Okay. If regression occurs, in other words, a person's fairly mature, but they're going backwards, they're backsliding, you can move more rapidly down the spectrum that I painted for you because they've already been there. So the coaching goal that you have using this pacing concept is to allow people to self-correct and continuously improve. So you do more and more directive sort of managing, and less guidance, direction, so forth. But now they understand the ropes, and they can self-correct and continuously improve, but you're still with them. Let's talk about you being competent in pacing. There's two elements. One is diagnosis, and the other is range. These are pretty easy to understand. We've covered the first already, diagnosis. So you'd want to take a look at, the pacing concept I just gave you. And for each of your associates, you want to get a fairly good idea of where they are, if you will, in their maturity level. That's the diagnostic part. So be sure you do that and continue to work at that. Now, the other part is range. So that's your range, your capability of moving up and down the spectrum, if you will, from directive to collaborative to delegative. And so you have to be able to move up and down, and also to then gauge where what approach you use to your associate again. So if you are not able, if you're not right now capable to be highly directive, and then on the other end, delegative, and in between collaborative, you may tee that up as a developmental goal for you. And that'd be very, very important to develop that. And if that is the case with you, I highly recommend that you go to the episode that we had on self-coaching. That was some time ago, and that was in connection with the first imperative, leadership imperative, the one of being a self-aware and skillful leader. I have a very good process to walk you through a series of questions so you can do some quality thinking and planning for yourself. So if you have that developmental need, look that up, will you? It'll serve you quite well. Now, let's talk about making performance coaching happen, unearthing opportunities. Once you understand the importance of performance coaching, it's not difficult to spot coaching opportunities. The large challenges, of course, are readily identified. And the smaller challenges that your associate may be having, you may have to take the initiative there and inquire how you're doing and can I help with anything, that sort of thing. We also talked about in one of the earlier episodes, coaching by walking around. You may have heard about managing by walking around. Coaching is a little spin on that, and it's actually caring by walking around, and we could call it coaching by walking around too. And that's where you're out there with a purpose to try to help folks and support them and nurture them and that sort of thing. So we discussed that, and when you do that, a very good practice. You need to be genuine. You need to listen, and you're not snooping. You're there to maybe be of some help to be a good performance coach. On the larger ticket items, you want to carve out some time to engage in quality thinking and interacting with your associate. One great way to do that is regular one-on-one meetings. And we discussed that in the past. It's also in the book, that Building Commitment. Performance coaching regards business opportunities and challenges, and also personal development. The business opportunities and challenges for your associate and their own personal development. Okay. And one-on-one meetings, I want to say again, check out the book because I have a nice section on there on one-on-one meetings. Let's move now to another important element, and that's periodically discussing your relationship with the associate. You need to gauge the interaction. We talked about the model, the pacing, but you want to involve it in the process once in a while. You don't want to take it for granted. Here's some dynamite questions for you. And you do this with people that are good performers. You wouldn't want to do this necessarily with a person that you're having problems with and you're really, really working on some maybe even disciplinary kinds of things you're thinking about. But these are people that are doing fine or doing great. And you just need to gauge that relationship once in a while by involving them. So here are the questions. You ask the person, what would you like me to do more of or start doing? You can see this requires a little bit of courage on your part, and you got to be ready for some dialogue and take it wherever it needs to go. What would you like me to do more of or start doing? And the second one is, what would you like me to do less of or stop doing? And then you shut up and listen and have some good dialogue. It allows you to gauge the relationship, and you may be surprised sometimes what they say. Back off this, do more of that, and what have you. Also, then you can get involved in this too, and what you would like them to do more of, less of, and start doing, stop doing, that sort of thing. So you can ask those questions too. You don't have to agree, but treat the feedback as a gift to engage in meaningful dialogue. Now you're vulnerable in doing that, and a lot of leader managers, vulnerable, that's a bad deal. That's not a bad deal. Vulnerability is a great plus for you if you have the courage and the fortitude to work with it. It's not a weakness. It opens the door. It provides courage to be sincere, open, honest, and willing to take challenges and improvement. It opens the door to moving things to new and better places. You don't want to be a buffoon, vulnerable, but you're a professional manager. You take risks. You're trying to move things, and you're okay at being vulnerable. You don't have all the answers, but you can process whatever feedback you get. Another topic here, the art of delegating. As you move up the spectrum, either with a particular assignment or the key result area or the position as a whole, delegating, one of the management approaches, critical leader management skill. And you got to think of delegating, we mentioned this in the past, as an act of entrusting responsibility and authority to others and create accountability for results. Delegating is not passing the buck, giving up your overall accountability. Remember, we made that distinction, accountability versus responsibility. Refusing to take a decision or make a decision by assigning it to another. And is also not shirking your personal responsibility. For delegating to be truly effective, it needs to be looked upon as an investment rather than a way of getting rid of work. It needs to be results driven, not activity driven. See my book on this, again, building commitment. And I have a whole section on there on delegating, a lot more specifics than we could go into here. So be sure and check that out if you don't already have that book. Okay, winding down here, a final thing I'd like to talk about is constructive feedback and encouragement as you're doing your performance coaching. They're different, and it's an important distinction. Constructive feedback is based on observations. Remember we talked about, if you're with me, the ladder of inference. You go from specific observation to judgments and generalizations and so forth as you climb the rungs of the ladder. So constructive feedback is based on the bottom rung down there. It's the things you see and hear and so forth. Whereas praise and concern deals with more of your judgments and generalizations and conclusions. And there's an important distinction. You go from opinion, judgments and so forth to specific behaviors. And you can do things more with specific behaviors. You can do something about behaviors. That's where your positive enforcement comes in. You like something to see or hear, whatever. You need to get specific about what it is and so forth. Not that, that you're doing well in that area, but if you want to repeat it, why do you say that? What are the specifics that you have? The same with negative reinforcement. If you want something to cease, then you got to be specific about what is it, the behaviors you're talking about. Constructive feedback, again, needs to be earned. It needs to be timely, needs to be specific and personalized. And also very, very important, needs to be genuine. So those are important things to bear in mind. So I like what, to wrap this little part up, the late Bob Mager, who was a premier instructional technologist, how to design instruction that works. And I had a good relationship with Bob, but he always had the phrase, catch people doing things right and let them know about it in no uncertain terms. Positive reinforcement. All right. A lot of good stuff here for you. Be sure and again, review. You always go back and review the episode by going to welty.com and also checking out the books in this particular book, the Building Commitment. Okay. We'll leave that, for this topic now. And next time we're going to still be under the, banner, if you will, of performance coaching and spend the full episode on a great process I have for you. I call it analyzing and resolving performance discrepancies. They aren't bad things. They happen, a gap between what you like to have happen and what is happening. And sometimes it's obvious and you work with your associate and you close that gap. And sometimes just time will take care of closing the gap. But other times you need to get involved and it's not apparent. So you need some help to analyze just what's going on and then to map out a resolution that fits that analysis. Okay. And we'll go through that with you next time. All right. In the meantime, you take care of yourself and we'll see you.